Stephen, what do you make of the spat between Malcolm Turnbull and Donald Trump? They got on well not that long ago. A frosty start with that phone call they had about the refugee deal, but then sort of got on okay when in office. Not so much at the moment, Stephen.
It's unfortunate that this has happened, Kieran. There's a different element to United States foreign policy occasioned by the return of Donald Trump to the White House. Trump 2.0 has grafted a personal element into US foreign policy, and it's simply this. And we've seen it in relations with different countries. Countries as different as Canada and Denmark, for example. If President Trump likes the leader of the country concerned, then he considers that country to be a friend. That's most graphically on display in his relationship with Vladimir Putin. So if you have a circumstance in which there's an important issue on the agenda between Australia and the US at the moment, tariffs, it's most unwise for people to be critical of the Trump administration, or even more so, President Trump himself, because you're going to get a response which is unpleasant. So at the moment, we may not see any kind of exemption on steel, aluminium, and the like, because the president's shins have been kicked quite unnecessarily.
Yeah, it's interesting. My colleague Annalise Nielsen put it well yesterday, I think, in when she said it's better and nations at the moment seeking not to put their proverbial head above the parapet. But you believe that this has done that?
Yes, there's no question about that, because in the White House they wouldn't necessarily draw the dividing line between a Prime Minister and former Prime Ministers. Annalise is right. If you want to achieve something with the current US administration, it's much better to pursue quiet diplomacy on the argument. So we have plenty of arguments to suggest we should be exempted, such as the massive trade surplus that the US runs with us, the fact that Australian companies have got substantial investments in these sectors in the United States. They're the arguments that can be won. There is no point abusing people in senior roles in Washington, D.C. None.
Is it possible, Stephen, though, that you could have had the best diplomacy, and they've got Greg Norman in and Joe Hockey and whoever else, but Trump Mark II, probably under the influence of people like Peter Navarro, his trade advisor, that he probably would not give us an exemption anyway. Is that a fair
Yes,
possibility?
not in an immediate sense, but we have more than a fair measure of support in the United States Congress, in both houses. And relationships with leading senators and congressmen ultimately come into play in terms of the White House. The current Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is no fool either. So you have senior people who can quietly absorb the arguments. I'm thinking of Congressman Joe Courtney from Connecticut, whose district represents the submarine manufacturers, the Virginia-class submarine manufacturers. People who can put an argument quietly but effectively, and over time see these tariff decisions rolled back.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we have a circumstance like the Canadians now find. The new Canadian Prime Minister, Mr. Carney, has to argue publicly, because the dispute has gone on not only for so long, but Donald Trump has been so hostile to Ottawa since he was re-elected.
Yes, indeed. You've got the Canadians and that response. Difficult economically, politically, the Liberal Party in Canada and Mark Carney, though, look like they're in a good position politically, because Canadians have, understandably reacted in a patriotic way.
Absolutely, precisely the same way that Australians would react in these circumstances. But Donald Trump never, ever got on with former Prime Minister Trudeau. That's the background there. And he has this idea, this is Mr. Trump, has this idea that the United States should expand further. And he takes the example of the Louisiana Purchase under the Jefferson administration, or the purchase of Alaska, which was offered by Russia after the American Civil War. He wants to see the US expand geographically, be it Greenland, be it Canada, be it in the Panama Canal. So you've got to take those circumstances into consideration and see where you focus your diplomacy. And in this situation, focus it in terms of the administration, not only on the White House, but in the Congress, where people can be extraordinarily helpful if they wish to be.
Stephen Loosley, great to get your insights as always. We'll talk to you soon.